Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 46 of Parenting Autism. My name is Sandy Coulter. I'll be your host today, and I am joined by my hubby, Chris.
Hi there.
Hey, and I thought today we would talk about homeschooling because that seems to be the buzz, at least in our area of South Florida. There's a lot of buzz going on. If you're watching the news at all, you can see that Florida's become a hot spot with this COVID-19, and because of that, there's been a lot of questions going on what families are going to do about school, and probably a lot of families who never thought about homeschooling, which we used to be one of those, are now considering it. And I know we had some questions coming in. We had someone come in this week. Brandy came in this week and wanted to know more about it, and that was already on my mind and my heart to share it. So that was just like affirmation when that question came in. And so I thought maybe we could do this kind of like an interview process, because you really have more answers than I do, because it's your job.
Right.
You know, like, you know some things about my work, but I don't know you don't know all the details. So I know the surface about what it's like for you to be the teacher for Bryce, but I really don't know all of the details.
Yeah.
So I thought we could take that approach. And I just wanted to give a little backdrop in case somebody's joining us for the first time or they haven't had a chance to listen to all of our episodes. But last year, Bryce was entering kindergarten, and prior to that, we had him in a typical VPK classroom. We also had him at the public school in what Florida calls an ESE classroom for special education. And so we wanted to go ahead and try to streamline him into the public school classroom with the teacher. I think there were 25 students, and then he would have some type of assistant aide that would help him as much as possible, they said. But we knew it wouldn't be full-time assigned. So we gave that a whirl. The first few weeks went well because Bryce is very good about following instructions and obeying. He's not the type of kid that'll wander out of his chair and go around the classroom. He's just the type that needs assistance. And that's what became the issue. Once they needed to go into independent work, Bryce could not work independently. He needed someone to prompt him. So the email came for us to have a meeting. It came up that they wanted to put him into an autism unit. And that was something we felt wouldn't be good, because on the flip side of that, Bryce doesn't have a lot of bad behaviors that need attention, and we were afraid that he would get lost in that classroom because he would be the quiet one as opposed to the one that needed a lot of attention. And while I know it works great for a lot of families, because we have friends who have their kids in the autism units, we felt that wasn't for us.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when we went to the meeting at the school, we were both talking that homeschool might be the best option, but really it was the one that we were thinking least about. We tried looking at private schools and other types of education, and we're like, well, it just wasn't coming together that way. And when we got the notice from the school, we were prepared that we were going to do homeschool if that's what it meant for Bryce to get an education.
We did, and we had we're people of faith, and so we pray a lot, and we were praying for really specific signs that we would know what was the right thing to do for Bryce. And a couple of those things that were affirmation would be, first of all, we had applied for a scholarship for him more than a year before, I think, and we had just gotten the notification that he was approved.
That's true.
And so at first we were like, okay, well, we don't need that because we're going to go ahead and try the public
kindergarten
school.
Yeah.
And then we got another notification that we would have to let them know like within a week. It was like we had 5 days or something like that. So then we're like, oh, well, we need this scholarship now. And so we knew that that was a sign that, okay, this is still a possibility. We can still get a scholarship which basically helped pay for Bryce's curriculum and the things that he would need for school. So that was a huge... we had to make a decision and make it quick, and it was all like right in that timeline that was still available. And I just think we both had peace about it. Another thing was, once Bryce was going to go into kindergarten, you were excited and a little anxious to get him back to the regular workforce because you had been pretty much taking care of Bryce and with his therapies and everything like that and working from home base,
Right.
but you wanted to have like a regular steady
job. Yeah.
Yeah. And you were in the interview process for a couple of different things and one specific job. And oh my gosh, it was like a couple of months that you had been going through this whole process. And then lo and behold, they were making their decision that week.
Yeah, it was
that
all came
week.
to a
And
head.
it was the day after that we met with the school, pulled Bryce out of public school, that you got a call the next day saying they were giving that job to someone else. They had gone a different direction, which was affirmation again, because you were going to have to decline that job because we're like, no, Bryce is going to be your full-time job. And you've told me since then that you're calling. You feel it now. You know that this is what it's one of your life purposes is to be Bryce's teacher.
So I quickly did some research on different curriculums and what everybody else was using for kids on the spectrum. And this curriculum, Time for Learning, came up a lot. So I researched that. And what I liked about it was that you could go one grade above and one grade below the actual grade that you're teaching. So let's say Bryce was struggling in language arts, but he was excelling in math.
Right.
So I could, if I wanted to, go a grade ahead in math and keep him go to that level for him. Because a lot of kids on the spectrum, they have strengths and weaknesses in different areas.
Right.
But for us, we ended up staying on the same grade level for everything. But there was a perk that I looked at for this curriculum. Go ahead.
No. You finish your thought, please.
It's all online. And I know Bryce, he seems to like online things. Like, it keeps his attention. I knew that if I was going to sit down next to him with a textbook and try to teach him things out of a textbook, it just wasn't going to work for him. He's not that kind of a learner. So I found that, and I also found reading eggs, and this is all for kindergarten. So that would help him with words, sight words, and spelling and phonics, as well as Time for Learning. But they both teach a little differently. So I thought, Bryce, he had not a whole lot of words when we started. I mean, he had a limited vocabulary and limited sentences. And so I thought putting both of those curriculums together for him would help him understand more about what was being taught. And it really worked out beautifully. So Time for Learning has language arts, math, and science, and Reading Eggs has language arts and math. So what I would do is I would go through all the Time for Learning curriculum, and then maybe the next day I would go through all the Reading Eggs curriculum, and then back to Time for Learning the following day. So I would just rotate them. And he really took to both of them. He really likes both of them. I even had ABC Mouse in there, and I've heard some kids love that program, but for whatever reason, Bryce couldn't tell me why. He did not like ABC Mouse. So we stopped ABC Mouse.
And it may be something you come back to.
Yeah. And speaking of things Bryce wasn't able to tell us, the week after we started a homeschool, he told me 2 times that he loved me unprompted for the first time ever. Like, he had another level of joy being home and being taught by Daddy than we could ever imagine. It was just unbelievable. And we also found out that later on that he was actually scared to go to public school, and he said it was dangerous. He really couldn't tell us what about it was dangerous, but I think what we deduced was it was
Well, with time, he said something about the bell.
Right.
And so then we figured out it was the fire drill.
Alarm. Yeah.
And they also do the code blue in case there's, God forbid, a terrorist that comes into
I
the
don't
school.
know what code that is.
We didn't have that when we were in school, but it's apparently
yeah.
some type of alarm sound that they do once
For
a month.
active
And I've
shooter,
had teachers telling me that, if there's an active shooter in the building.
And early on, I asked them if they could tell us when the fire alarms were going to be and when those other drills were going to be so that we could prepare Bryce. Because one of the things with autism is they can't predict the future. Like, if an alarm goes off, most kids would know, okay, you're going to stand in the line, you're going to exit the building, and everything's going to be fine. But in Bryce's mind, when an alarm goes off, it's very startling, and he doesn't know what's going to happen, even though he may have done it 5 times before.
Well, and I would say also with Bryce's mind, and again, I can't speak to anybody else, but I do know with Bryce, he's very literal, so it would be very difficult for him to distinguish that this is real and this is not real.
True.
So now if he heard a fire alarm, he would really think there's a fire in the building and that there's danger of the fire, not just the danger of a loud sound ringing in his ears.
Right.
So, we didn't know that he had this fear because we knew he had anxiety because he just exhibited that in different ways. But when we took him to school, he never complained about going to school.
No.
He was always excited. He walked independently with his backpack on, went in like a big boy. There was never any crying, any no's, any of that. And, you got a good point that when we started kindergarten last August, our goal was for Bryce to be able to put 5 to 7 words together in a sentence. Mm-hmm. He wasn't communicating to us like he is now.
Right.
And also when you talked about choosing his curriculum, Bryce had minimal to no interest in books at all.
Right.
Or even sitting and reading them. Where fast forward now, as he's now in first grade, he loves the books and he loves reading. So it may be something that you may be able to start working in a textbook a little bit too, because he does have interest in books and reading is good. So, you just kind of progress with the child and where you're at. But I want to go back. Oh, did you want to elaborate on that?
As far as the books go, Time for Learning does have books as part of the curriculum that you read as you go through learning new words. So we're always reading books.
He's reading the books with you, or you're reading them?
Yes, we're reading them together, or he's listening to them, or if he has trouble with a word, I'll help him.
Yeah.
That type of thing.
Very good. So when you said you did research, what kind of research, or how did you do your research to help these parents research?
Sure. So Facebook was a great resource for me. I joined all of the homeschool autism Facebook groups that I could find because I knew ASD kids learn a little differently than, they're all different, but I wanted to
there
hear
still
feedback
seem to be some core
from those parents.
Similarities there.
So as far as curriculum, I started out with a list of probably 10 curriculums from all of those groups. And what I did was I narrowed it down to the most popular ones that people were talking about the most. And Time for Learning and Reading Eggs were one of the top in the top. Yeah. And so I did research some other ones. But I felt these two would fit him the best.
What were your deciding factors?
That most of it, if not all of it, would be online to where I could project the class onto a TV and I could sit next to him and keep him on track and help him with any stumbling blocks that he had.
Yeah.
As far as writing goes, what we decided to do was go with handwriting without tears. And I talked to his old RBT. I said, he's struggling to hold a pencil. The pencil pressure isn't that great. It's really light on the paper. We're not having much success, because that's where the textbook came in air quotes.
Yeah.
I was trying to teach him writing through I picked up some books at the dollar store. I printed out some pages from the internet to try to help him write. But I really wasn't making much progress. So I reached out to his old RBT, Rhonda, and she said handwriting without tears works great. So I was able to find that and implement that early on last year in his homeschooling. And it's been a great success.
Does he take well to that?
He does not like writing. So, and Bryce does not like coloring. He doesn't like drawing. He doesn't like any of that type of thing for whatever reason.
I think it's fine motor skill issue. I think it's difficult for him.
Maybe. I don't know.
Because he has a hard time with the grip, and they've been working with
he has a great
him on
grip
that
now.
since he was 2.
Yeah, he's got a good grip now.
But maybe it's still difficult for him. He's definitely resistant to it. I agree.
Yeah.
He's not a crafty kid.
He's not interested in it. So,
No.
And that's one of the beauties of homeschooling is, hey, if they're not interested in something and it's not critical to them, having a job, you don't need to be able to draw a tree to be a doctor or, an airline pilot. But, he does. That aside, he does get drawing in his other therapies, OT and speech and they do arts and craftsy types things.
Well, I was going to say that's a benefit that we have. So in addition to homeschool, at the same time, we started outside therapy services for him again. So we got him speech and language, and then we also got him occupational therapy. And I think he has like 3 hours a week on each of those. And then we also started the ABA, which they work primarily with behaviors, but the occupational therapy, she works with him on the writing and his core muscles and different things. Cutting, building
and we
those
worked on
muscles
cutting
and
too.
stuff. But you don't have to put a lot of that in other than focusing on the letters, because we do have a team of support with the therapies.
Right. And also, Bryce's biggest deficits when we started was language, and he had no clue about math. Like, he wouldn't even know what that is.
He just knew numbers.
Yes.
But
and
not
I
to do with
knew that at the core, he needed to learn those skills quickly. And the sooner he learned how to speak and learned sight words, the better. Speaking of sight words, maybe we can put it in the show notes. So I bought this hanging... Oh goodness, the word escapes me now. But it's like a hanging chart, and I bought a box of 200 and some index cards with sight words on them. So every morning we would come into his room, we'd play a little music, on the drums or whatever with the cymbals, because he likes music. That kind of get him to wake up and get focused. And then I would have probably about 6 to 8 sight words on the board, and we would sound them out and learn those and talk about how they're used in a sentence or how they're used in life. And we also did a Bible verse. So he would memorize a Bible verse. He's very good at memorizing. So every morning we would do that. And once I felt like he got a sight word down, I would just put that in the pile and replace it with a new sight word. And so that worked very well for us too, to have those in the morning up on the wall and focus on those for the first few minutes of the day before we got into our curriculum. That was really good.
I think that was good. And one thing that we did was we have there's designated spots where he does his learning. And I think that is important, because I think one of the things why I hesitated for homeschool versus a regular school, just based on my own experience and not knowing how Bryce would be, I thought he would crave structure. And then I also wasn't sure how he would do with the idea of school being here, because he's very compartmentalized in his mind. So certain things happen here, then they only happen here. And he used to be worse about that. Like, you could only do this at this place and only this at that place. And I was afraid he couldn't make that transition in his mind, that he could actually do schoolwork here at what he calls the Coulter Hotel where we live. So that was one concern. And then the other one was just the structure. because he is a kid that really does like
he likes a schedule,
and he likes to know what's going to be happening because he likes that predictability.
Right.
So having set up his room to where he knows where he writes, he knew where his sight words were, that was consistent, and he knows where you do your online stuff, which TV we do it on and all of that. I think that really does help. So, every child is different. Each parent should know their child, and if they don't get to know your child, it's a good opportunity to get to know your child. But kind of follow their lead, because I've found that Bryce has led us to what works best for him, and then we just kind of build upon that. Yeah,
some of the lessons he likes to celebrate at the end of certain lessons. I think there's like fireworks that go off or balloons that pop. So he will run around the living room one time and in celebration, and then come back to the computer mouse to go to the next level. So that's something that you're not really able to do in a public school environment. When you get a lesson right, they're not going to let you run around the classroom one time to celebrate. And that's part of Bryce's happiness. You don't want to squash his happiness. And we work on homeschool, I'd say 2 to 3 hours a day, Monday through Friday.
Do you have a set schedule for him?
Well, here's how it happens is he gets up out of bed, and then he likes to have his breakfast first before his shower. So we'll do breakfast, and then we'll brush his teeth, and then we'll take a shower, get dressed, and then we start homeschool. So it doesn't
But you don't follow a clock schedule.
We don't go by the clock.
You wake up at 9, you shower at 9:15. You don't have it that rigid.
We don't, because we may run into a hiccup in the morning where something's not going real well. So we have to take more time to go through whatever routine that is that he might be having trouble with, or, what time he gets out of bed. He gets out of bed pretty consistently in the morning at around the same time. So it's just how smoothly the morning goes up until homeschool depends on the start time of homeschool. And I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And I know Bryce well enough that when he wakes up, actually before he goes to sleep the night before, he's already thinking about the next day and what's going to be happening the next day. So for him to have that flow is fine, but he doesn't, I have noticed, because I work from home now, so I've been able to observe more, even though I'm in my home office most of the time. He doesn't hold you to a time like he does other people.
Right. Other people who are on his schedule for therapies, they are at a set time every day. And he knows that he has to be there at a certain time, or somebody's coming over at a certain time.
And if they're early, he calls them out if they're early. And if they're late, he calls them out if they're late. He doesn't have you to his clock like that. And I think that is a good thing, because it could really throw him off.
I think there's less anxiety that we don't have a set start time. But and so that for kindergarten, that worked really well. That was pretty much how we did kindergarten. Now we've started first grade in June because I just wanted to keep him going. I didn't want to get off of that schedule for the summer.
Right.
I was planning to do that anyway, quarantine or no quarantine. Right. That was my plan, because I just wanted him to get ahead, and I know that the grades ahead of us will be more and more difficult to accomplish, and I want to get a head start, so to speak, on that if he does end up having trouble at any point.
Yeah, and it keeps him in a routine as well. Again, not a hard, rigid routine, but he still knows on these days there's going to be some type of daddy school.
Right.
And he'll even ask for it. I mean, he really does enjoy it.
So one of the things I want to mention about homeschool is that you don't have papers graded by a teacher. His accomplishments are graded online through quizzes and tests that he takes after he finishes a module or a lesson. So there's no outside teacher to be accountable to. There's no school board to be accountable to. It's much more relaxed flow being at home and doing homeschool than if you were trying to do virtual learning with a teacher or some type of classroom like what the public schools are trying to do with their kids. So what happens is with homeschool here in Florida, what you do is you keep a log of all of the work that you've done throughout the year, and Time for Learning keeps track of that. And I think also Reading Eggs keeps track of that also. So you can go in and you can print a spreadsheet of all the lessons that he's done. And I keep a journal or a planner of what we do on a day-to-day basis. What we're working on writing-wise, what lesson he's on in his online curriculum, and so forth. And then I also keep his papers that he writes, the letters that he's doing or whatever worksheets we print out. Time for Learning has worksheets that you can print out. If your student's having a little trouble in one area, they have like a resource tab that you can print out worksheets and do worksheets. So you keep all those records, and at the end of the year, you have a certified Florida teacher evaluate your student's progress. So what Florida Department of Education is looking for is that your student is moving forward in his education. So there's no kindergarten test per se or first grade test. They just want to see progress from one year to the next to show that he is learning and what he's accomplished in that learning. So in that respect, it really takes a load off of the parent to, oh no, we got to send my kid into this building and they're going to time him for 2 hours on a test that he's got to sit down and pay attention to and pick answers.
Mm-hmm. Bryce would not do well.
Bryce would not do well at all with that type of situation. So we're very fortunate that Florida school works like that. And once we completed the kindergarten curriculum with Time for Learning, I knew that he comprehended everything that he learned there. So I knew that he was ready for first grade, And there's other, placement tests. If you really want to get technical, you can find them on the internet to, take some type of test. Like we even picked up this game. It's called Are You Ready for First Grade Game Show? And it's a fun little game that we played with Bryce, and he just knows all the answers, So yep. We kind of knew, hey, he's really ready for first grade.
We got the game show, which he loves, and that was a great idea. And then you found some type of printout that was kind of like a checklist. Mm-hmm. And it said if he knows this, and it gave you so many items that he should know in language arts, so much that he should know in math. Yep. And he had nailed both of those. Mm-hmm. But then science was very weak, mm-hmm. and social studies was weak. And again, that's kind of intentional because we knew we needed to build up his language first so that mm-hmm. he could communicate in order to help him learn everything else. And he took right to math. I mean, yes. It might have taken a week or two, but once he got the concepts, he flew with math, which I kind of thought he would, only because of the way his mind is wired, because it's very factual. Mm-hmm. But science, he really, really is loving science. And it's great that you're able to give that a little more time and attention now because he finds that very interesting. I think we probably still need to work more to round him out, so to speak. Like with social studies, I'd like to teach him a little more about our flag and about our country, mm-hmm. just to give him some rounding. But again, that's the beauty of being flexible with this.
So that you bring that up, Time for Learning introduces social studies in second grade. Okay. So he's that's not part of his curriculum right now, but with first grade, what I'm also doing is incorporating some YouTube channels, which I can't think of off the top of my head. But if you just Google kids science, you'll find some great YouTube channels where, they have some funny adults on there that are doing science experiments mm-hmm. or telling you about the human body. So when we finish a lesson, I might switch over to one of those just to change it up a little bit and keep it fresh. Or, for instance, let's say the curriculum has a ladybug in it. And Bryce is like, what's that? You're like, a ladybug. Well, what do ladybugs eat? So he's very interested in ladybugs. So what we'll do is we'll finish that lesson out, and then I'll find a YouTube video on the ladybug life cycle, and we'll switch over to that temporarily because he's really interested and focused on that, so he can learn about that. And he gets very excited that if we do something like that, that he's interested at that moment. Because also with, it may be neurotypical kids too, but once Bryce gets focused on something, it's hard to redirect him, I would say.
I would say that too.
So he would probably carry on and ask questions about the ladybug in the middle of a math lesson.
Well, if you try to move on to math until you solve what he's trying to think about, he will. We call it fixating, and he does. He fixates on topics, and you have to get him past it.
Yeah, and it's great because he wants to learn about that. So I'm all about that. I'm like, hey, you want to learn about ladybugs? We're going to learn about ladybugs. We'll ready?
We'll get you 10 library books on ladybugs.
Yeah, and he loves the library right now. He does. Whenever we go to the library, okay, like this past week, he's like, Daddy, I want some books on space. Okay, you want some on the planets? Yes. So I went to the library, and even though we had some books on bugs, he still wanted some new books on the planets.
He did, because the week before he wanted them on bugs and germs because of all the sickness going around. He's very interested in understanding what germs are and how they can make people sick.
Why you can't see germs. I'm like, well, you need a microscope. What's a microscope? So we talk about a microscope. Daddy, can we get a microscope? So I think he's ready for a microscope. We can look at different things. We can look at plants
because he's trying to understand why people are wearing masks, why people aren't wearing masks, who's sick, who's not sick. Is it safe to go in this place? Is it not? Yeah. So, it is a time for us to take this teaching opportunity. And Bryce is the type that he now wants more than just a surface answer. He's got a lot of whys that follow,
he'll say
like why, because he wants to know more. And so we're doing that.
Being a homeschool teacher, you think outside the box when it comes to teaching. You'll find yourself out and about going to the grocery store or wherever, and teaching opportunities automatically come to your head. So whereas if you're just a regular parent with your kid in public school, you're not thinking about teaching your kid as much, and things might not jump out to you as much as if you were homeschooling them and say, hey, look at this, little Johnny, or what do you think about that? A day-to-day in a regular person's life just might be going to the store and coming home and not giving anything else a second thought.
Yeah, because you're not you're not in that thought process of teaching, where when it's your job, it's easy for you to be thinking about that. Yeah. I see teaching opportunities as well. If he's asking the questions or we think he shows interest in something, we're pretty good about being all over that and trying to explain further or get more information to help him understand it.
And you as a parent know what's best for your kid. That if they do go to public school, yes, they spend a lot of time with the teacher, but your child has your genes. And I know that when Bryce is home and I'm teaching him about things and I see his interests, I might not be able to pick up on those things if he was going to a public school, because he'd be there 6 hours out of the day and I wouldn't get to do the things I do with him, and have fun with him. And that leads me to another thing about homeschooling. With public school, your kid needs to be there for 6 hours because they're teaching, 20 or 30 kids in a room, where if you are homeschooling like we're homeschooling Bryce, if I give him my undivided attention 2 to 3 hours a day, we really focus and we accomplish a lot of things. Whereas if he was in a regular classroom, he'd be spacing out, he'd be behind and just not understanding anything.
It's true. And when kids are at school for that length of time, it's not just constant teaching that's going on. There's breaks in between. There's obviously lunch breaks, and there's PE classes or resource classes. And, you're just kind of condensing it. It's like getting something that's not diluted. It's just like full power on.
The upside of public school would have been the socialization aspect of it.
We were going to hit that for sure. That's the con.
But, Bryce, he has an allergy to dairy and he's allergic to peanuts. So we don't have to worry about him going to lunch and sharing cheese goldfish with another fellow classmate or
peanut butter and jelly is a huge
can I trade your
milk
for my apple juice? We don't have to worry about that, and we don't have to worry about him inadvertently getting peanuts and then we go to the ER. Right. So that's a relief too.
Yeah, it definitely, there's lots of pros, which we've been talking about. And if I were to say there was one downside to homeschooling, I think the only downside we've really seen has been the social aspect of that and with autism, that's a double whammy because social doesn't come natural to Bryce anyway. And if you have been listening to our podcast, I've been talking about social a lot because that's what I have taken on is he needs the social. And I really know that, in my spirit. And so I put together the social calendar and we've been making that work. And even with this coronavirus, I've had some parents that are now not comfortable again because it's starting to spike in our area. And I 100% respect that. And then I have other parents that they understand we're not exposed to a lot and they're not exposed to a lot and they're comfortable coming over here to our home and Bryce still being able to have that interaction. And then this past week, we even started for the first time letting him FaceTime a friend. And before we were letting him FaceTime my mom. So he knows Mama. And it was awkward. He'd leave her and we'd be like, hey, you can't just leave your iPad and leave her hanging. And we were telling Mom, start asking him some questions. So she would. We could hear her asking him questions. Then we were trying to work with him how to ask her questions.
He just didn't know how to keep a conversation going.
He doesn't. He's still learning that. So we felt like this little friend that he has, they've known each other a couple years now. So he's kind of has a good feel for Bryce. And they're the same age. He's like a couple months younger than Bryce. And he loves being on FaceTime and his phone. Like that's his thing. So Bryce he'll go on with him and he's very excited, when he gets Michael's calls. He still doesn't quite know what to say. He'll know to ask him, how was your weekend? And he'll ask that on a Wednesday because he just knows that's a question we've taught him. But that's okay. It's starting conversation. Or he'll say, what did you do today? And then the other day he asked Michael, what did you do today? And then Michael says, nothing. And then Bryce was all excited. Michael did nothing today. Michael did nothing today. But he was excited that he got an answer. It's like he was so excited that a conversation came back. But it's social, and in this day and age, I don't know that everything that's happening is going to change anytime soon. So we need to work on the FaceTime thing for him. So he does have that social skill with FaceTime.
Yeah.
Because he won't be able to see as many friends. He still can't go to a playground. We're not taking him to a playground.
Right.
And he's asking for it. We can't take him to the pop gym. There's a lot of places that we can't take him where he could get a higher level of social. But if we can get it through FaceTime where he can actually still see them, and it also teaches him how to continue a conversation, how to start one and how to end one, because, we won't let him just abruptly hang up. And if so, he has to call back and apologize and then end that conversation in a good way. Well, those are the kind of social skills we're working on. And that's the kind of stuff, it might be different in a school setting, but, he doesn't get to observe the other kids and how they interact. I realize he's missing that. But if we keep having these social dates, he's going to get it, and we can
I like
show him
his
videos
social
and
dates
stuff.
because it's one-on-one with another child where he can concentrate. Whereas if he was at a playground with 15 other kids, he would get lost.
Or he would just follow because he is a follower, but he wouldn't interact. So I think this is working really great. He sees kids maybe 2 to 3 times a week. And it's, as a parent, I would say it is a lot of work to make it happen. Work in the sense that you have to be disciplined, you have to be organized, and you have to be consistent. Because I've had other parents say, oh yeah, we'd love to get together. But then when it comes down to actually getting a date on the calendar, it's difficult
hard
to make that happen, or things happen and things get canceled and you don't want to get discouraged. But all in all, it's really been going well, and that's the direction. And so, if you feel like you need that for your child as well, that's what you do. You just kind of make that happen and get your little circle together. And we have a few friends that Bryce will see, I would say almost on a regular basis, where weekly or every other week. And then there's some that I'm starting to bring in that might be once a month. And he gets a little confused. I mean, he saw one little friend come over the other day and he called her a different name. And, that's okay. He's just getting this exposure, and everybody has been really great about that. So I just want to encourage that. But I wanted to also talk about costs and scholarships. And I know it may be different, obviously, from state to state and
country
to country. But I want you to speak to our experience and how, we've been able to afford to do this.
Yeah, so in Florida, they have something called the Gardner Scholarship, and we are just so blessed to have this scholarship that it does pay for school supplies. It pays for his curriculum, pretty much anything that has to do with school. So even in the past few weeks, we had to get a new laptop because the old laptop was not, we've had it for a long time, and it wasn't fast enough to play some of the online things that we were doing. So we had to upgrade to a new laptop, and it paid for that. So there are a bunch of, unexpected expenses during the school year, and we're just very thankful that the scholarship does cover pretty much everything that we've had to get for him and his schooling.
Did you find that the time for learning and the reading eggs, was that relatively affordable for those who may not have a scholarship?
Yes, I think it's very affordable for those who don't have a scholarship. I can't think of the price off the top of my head, but I would say time for learning might be around $100 for the year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And reading eggs would be something similar to that. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. And okay. I think, don't quote me on this, but I believe that if you're an educator, you can get ABC Mouse for free. So you might look into that. But like I said, Bryce really didn't take to ABC Mouse, so we didn't continue that curriculum. But yeah.
Very good. And I also wanted to bring up another resource that we've discovered, and it's Lakeshore Learning. Yeah, Lakeshore Learning. Mm-hmm. That's where we got his Are You Ready for First Grade game show, and they have it for each grade. I saw they have it also for second, third, and fourth grade. We were wanting to get some more games for Bryce because he's now interested in board games. And so he likes to play Sorry. He now knows Pop the Pig. And, so he's liking all these games. But we were thinking, what could we get that would tie in education and having fun with games? So they have a really large assortment. So this is, again, coming from specifically parenting autism, which would be different than your neurotypical games. Mm-hmm. But we found one that says, what do you do? And
what should you do?
What should you do? That's right. Yeah. What should you do? And so it's a board game, and it would be like comparative to Chutes and Ladders, where you're just kind of going around a path to get to the top. But then you have cards that you can land on, and then the questions will come out. If you did blah, blah, blah.
If your ball rolls out into the street.
Well, there was a good one. It said, if your ball rolls out into the street, what should you do? And it gave him 3 choices. Mm-hmm. You go and get the ball, you go find a parent to ask you, or to ask them to get the ball, or you just leave the ball in the street.
And you play something else.
And his first answer was, you go get the ball. We're like, do you go get the ball?
Right.
But it gives teaching opportunities for him and making sure he understands really does he understand what is the right thing to do? And so all of the cards didn't quite apply to him, and that's fine. I mean, he's not
Some
in
of them
school,
are related
speaking
to
of.
school,
So
yeah.
some are related to that, or bullying or things like that. Maybe he hasn't quite experienced, thank God, but it's going to be able to teach him, and he'll grow into these questions. But he asked to play it again. And what was cool was it just came in on Friday. And so it was our date night, and we had Missy with him to play with him. And so she opened that game with him, and she was really great because she said some of these questions, I think, Bryce couldn't relate to them. He couldn't comprehend them, and that was fine. But on there's like a playground, there's a library, there's all these things in the town that you're kind of taking your token through. And so she just made it fun, like pretend, and said, oh, well, let's go play on the playground, which I could tell that because that's what he wanted us to do yesterday. And then when they got to the library, she goes, oh, here's the library. Let's go there and read a book. So then she grabbed a book because we had just gotten his new library books. That's what you do. You improvise with him, but you're still getting him engaged. You're keeping him off his iPad. He's having fun while he's learning, and you're also teaching him life skills. I mean, that's like a win-win-win.
And he likes it.
When you can make that happen, and he's enjoying it, and he's asking for it because he liked it that much. So it's all about how you introduce it to him and how you, as the parent, or who have, like Missy, she made it fun. And so he wanted more.
What else? The other thing I like about that game is if you wanted to, you could even write your own cards. So when he lands on the square, if you're having difficulty in a particular area, like crossing the street looking both ways, what should, if you're going to cross the street, what should you do? I don't know if that card's in the game or not, but listen, if it's not in there, we could write that one out and put it in the stack. So when he lands on that square, hey, that'll be one of our things that we can do.
Right. You get to address an issue. We should put like the revolving doors. What do you do? Do you stay and watch them, or do you go through?
Exactly.
Something like that where it's coming up in the form of a game.
Sure. And you're addressing a behavior.
Yeah. So I think it's like we've stumbled onto this. It's all fresh, but it's so cool. And they have different bingo games for learning. They had something that's similar to Jenga, but it's sight words. So we got the next level sight words for him so we can continue to build his language. But it's in the form of a game, and he likes when things crash. He'd much rather things crash than he build them. I don't know. That's his thing. So, it's really cool. So I can put that link in the show notes as well. And again, they've got it categorized by age. And, we're now at first grade level. And Bryce is going to be 7 in October. So he's got the later birthday. A lot of kids would be going into second grade now that are close to his age, but he's got that extra year. But it's really about development. And it really depends where your child is at. In fact, it was last week. Yeah, it was last week that his new ABA, or his BCBA, the one that writes his plan, she's new to Bryce, and so she was bringing up some new questions and kind of reviewing his plan with us and where he's at. And so he's going to get a new plan. They do it every 6 months, so his new plan will come up in October. Well, he's mastering out of a lot of things in his ABA that they're setting goals for him, which is great, but then we learned that it's really designed for up to age 4. So I would hope that he would be mastering out at this point because he's almost 7.
Right.
So it makes sense that, thank God, he's finally nailing all of that because he has been about 18 months to 2 years behind in his development.
Yeah.
So when they do his new plan in October, they'll be going, I guess there's another level that they'll be going to. And so they've already prepared us, we don't know. He may have some behaviors like getting upset and frustrated because things aren't going to come as easy to him, and that's okay. But we're encouraged that he's advancing and he's moving forward and that there's still growth opportunities. Because I've heard about kids that have graduated from ABA, and I'm thinking, I would think Bryce would be far from that. Well, he may be past the 4-year-old part, but he still has a lot, to work on. So anyway, that was just another thing that happened recently in the past week. But what I was really driving at was when you're doing these curriculums and when you're getting these games, just don't focus on an age is a guide. When they put on a game that is for ages 6 and older, It's just to give you a guideline. Doesn't mean you have to be 6 years old or older, but it just kind of gives you an idea where it might be based. But don't get frustrated on that. If we need to do something that isn't quite as advanced, that's okay. We've done that with Bryce, and now we see him advancing and playing games and showing interest in things that his peers at the same age may have been interested in 2 years ago. Well, Bryce is there now. That's okay. That's part of what we've had to learn to accept. We're on Bryce's timetable. He's not on ours.
Right.
And so when you're picking a curriculum for school, like what you said, that's why that was great that you said you picked one that has that flexibility of being maybe a grade behind or a grade ahead, because you don't really know where your child's at until you start working with them. And then you get the feel of, okay, they're good here, but I need to work with them on that area. And I think it's the same thing for the games. We're just trying to figure out which ones he will benefit from now, and then some of them will hold on to and he'll grow into them. That would be the goal.
Yeah, and one other thing that came to my mind that we're probably going to do this year is the monthly STEM kits, or science kits, if you will. There's several companies out there that make these, so they're delivered to your home once a month, and each month there's a different little science project that you can do. So that'll be more of a hands-on thing that we can do with him in addition to his curriculum.
I think that's great. Well, and I've always felt like part of being in a regular school classroom, to me, the benefit was having resources, like having PE, having music class, having things outside of your typical classroom.
Right.
Listen, when I was in school, I loved resources.
Yeah. So he gets music therapy.
Right.
And
so we
horse
have
therapy.
that for him, which is great. And that's what I'm saying. So, you as the parent, I encourage finding resources, whatever they may be. PE can be going in the back or going down to the soccer field and kicking goals.
Or riding your bike.
Riding your bike, getting outdoors, using physical activity, kind of what your child likes.
Hey,
Bryce
listen,
loves to run.
We do yoga in the morning now.
Yeah.
So that's
and Bryce
fun.
likes that.
He does.
Works the body and the mind. So you can be creative with that, but it's not all about just the textbook. It's also having those resources and creating fun things to do. And we have this book here called Homeschool Adventures. It's called Learning Through the Power of Field Trips. So we wanted to just get out of the classroom and get out into the real world and, find some education that way. And so I'm going to give this away to the first person who messages us and says that they would like to have it. So if you're hearing this podcast and you'd like to have this Homeschool Adventures book, if you're the first one, then we'll send it your way. We'll get your mailing information.
We'll announce the winner on the next podcast.
And then we'll announce the winner on the next podcast.
So you can reach out to us, either through Facebook or Instagram or email or whatever.
And then we have all that information in the show notes. And I think it's parentingautismshow.com is our website, and you can email us that way. All right. And then the last thing I want to do to wrap up here today is Bryce has been very patiently waiting for us to finish this podcast. But since we talked about homeschooling, you've done such an amazing job with him. I mean, really, I'm going to clap.
Thank you.
Seriously, honey, you've done such an amazing job. And when I listen to him read, I know he doesn't have it memorized. I know he's truly reading. And I thought he should read a little snippet for everybody here. Go ahead.
Dog. Big dog, little dog. Big dogs and little dogs. Black dogs and white dogs. Hello, hello. Do you like my hat? I do not. Goodbye, goodbye. One little dog going in, 3 big dogs going out.
Did you miss one?
Yes. A blue dog on a red tree. Some big dogs and some little dogs go around in cars. 2 big dogs going up. 1 little dog going down.
All right, last page.
The green dog is up. The yellow dog is down. The blue dog is in. The red dog is out.
Excellent.
Good job, buddy.
All right. That's a fun
Thank you,
book.
Bryce.
Do you like Daddy being your teacher?
Yes.
Say bye, everyone.
Are you all done, Mommy?
I think we're
Yeah.
all done. We're going to wrap up this episode.
Do you want to tell everybody bye?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead. What do you want to
How
tell
do you want to tell them?
Bye.
Okay.
See ya.
See you tomorrow.
Oh, next
Okay,
time.
We'll see you next time.
All right.
All right,
bye.
everyone. Thanks for listening and have a great day.
Bye. Bye, people.
Good job, baby.